You're listening to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church lead pastor Dr. Joshua Laxton. Tune in each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in the world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. So this is our first take of 2024, and we have fully added the video capability. So,
Yes.
Hey, if you are tuning online and you're watching this, hey, welcome. If you are listening old school way, and that's podcast way, you know how old podcasts are? I mean, like old.
If I had to guess, 15 years.
Oh, gosh, longer. Like longer.
Really?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Back in the 1900s?
I can't remember if it was the late 1990s or early right when. I mean, in some sense, right when you had the .com, the bust, people even had podcasts. Like I was listening to, I think it was Seth Godin that talked about how he had a even before there was, before blogging. So they're old. I mean, old. I guess that's relative, I guess.
I didn't know podcasts were an old technology. Look at that.
Well, but, I mean, now you got these online, video features, but yeah, podcasts is just, for me, I do still listen to podcasts because they're easy to do while I'm walking or running.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Even though we did do one before the New Year for New Year.
We did.
Yeah. But this is the first time we're sitting here.
It is. And we're excited for a year. We're going to do a couple things today. We will talk about the most recent sermon by Dr. Ed Stetzer. And we'll also spend a little time debriefing on how you spent your last couple weeks and look forward to the sermon series coming up over the next month. So this past weekend was representing Jesus and his kingdom. This was January 7th and 8th in 2024 from 2 Corinthians 5:16 through 21. The main question that Dr. Stetzer led us through was, how do we represent Jesus and his kingdom well this year? That's such a great question, and I do think it really sets up, as we look at this being the political season, and the July series that we have coming up, the church and a divided democracy. So it's just really interesting to start the new year with a series that challenged us to represent Jesus and his kingdom. Certainly every single year. It's going to look different every year, but specifically this year, how do we do that well? Understanding that we know that there's going to be some things about this year that might be expected, might be unexpected.
Yeah. But even though it is an election year, it is also an Olympic year.
Oh, it is. Summer Olympics?
Yeah, so it gives us something else to look forward to. So
that's awesome.
It's interesting because what's fascinating is when Ed, when he talked about it, it's an election year. Yay. I think I did something similar to that. And I got an email about, because I'm doing it more from and not because I'm dreading it, but I want people to realize that it is a contentious time in the church. These election cycles have been. And so I'm actually looking forward to it because of the series that I'm going to do in June is what does the church look like in a divided democracy? And so how do we live as exiles, basically, because even though we do have a rich history here in America with Judeo-Christian values, America still isn't our home. Yeah. So we still have to get some understanding from the Bible on, okay, what do we do? So when I say yay, as if I'm not excited about it. One, I'm not necessarily excited about all of the contention and the vitriol that believers have, because I do think it weakens our witness. Because what's most important is that we're a good witness, not a stark advocate for whatever our political party or person is. So, nevertheless, so to that person who sent me the email, listen, I do it just for effect's sake. I understand where we are going this year, and I'm actually quite excited about teaching and educating Northland and how we are to intersect this continuing on in this idea of this cultural moment that really is chaotic and divisive. So I think it's going to be extremely helpful for our people.
It's an opportunity for the church.
Absolutely.
To, again, to separate ourselves, be a light in a dark world. And every single year brings things that we don't expect. Yeah. But at least we know this election year there are some things that we can't expect.
Yes.
So looking at the sermon, he gave us 4 things to talk about. First was we get a new perspective from this passage. Second, we are sent on a mission of reconciliation. Third, we are representing Jesus and his kingdom. And finally, it's all because of the cross. Mm-hmm. So I want to just spend some time on each of these, and I have a couple quotes. This is fun because sometimes when we do this, it'll be your quotes. Well, this time it's your former boss's quote. So you get to weigh in on some things that he said. So specifically for number 1, we get a new perspective. He said we want to see people in the world the way Jesus sees people. There's really a challenge to us. A whole lot of people are seeing the world by the way others want them to see the world. So if we recognize that describes us, the beginning of the year, it's a great opportunity for reflection, and many of us are doing that with New Year's resolutions. So if we listen to this sermon and that one really hits us between the eyes, how might we change? What's some insight that you can give us about how might we move away from that and gain a new perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to do it, and the first way would be to put your life under the authority of the Word and let the Word, and both the written Word and the when I say the living Word Himself, Jesus, so both the living written Word and the living Word Himself, let Him be the discerner of your heart. So that's the first thing I would say is let the Word impact you to a degree to bring conviction on where you're not seeing things the way He sees them. So that would be number 1. And number 2, going back to number 1, that could be a devotional time that you're reading the Word. And so, again, the first of the year is always a good time to either get a devotional book or pick a reading plan and just start reading the Word and let the Word dissect your heart. Also being under the teaching of the Word. So that's why one of the important elements of corporate worship gathering is being under the teaching of the Word. So that's number 1. Number 2 is with other people that you trust around you.
Yeah.
That could be your spouse, it could be a friend, it could be maybe a small group leader, that you just ask them, hey, what do you see in my life? Do you see any blind spots? Because that's ultimately the fact that you can't see like Jesus is a blind spot.
Right.
And so a lot of the times we might need others to tell us where our blind spots are. So that would be 2. The last one is if you know that there is a blind spot, that let's say you have anger issues, or let's say you want to be more active in your faith, or what I don't know what it might be for you, but if you know there's an area that you want to grow in, then find a book or a resource that's written from a godly perspective on that area and read. So that would be 3 ways I would say you can get a new, kind of help get a new perspective. But the one of the elements that I really appreciated him saying and really want to stress is that when you look at where the church has been over the last several decades, in the kind of caught up in this kind of crisis in America, I mean, you can actually even extend it all the way back to the culture wars of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The culture wars have somewhat at least dissipated from the actual, when I say vernacular that is used, culture wars. But nevertheless, we in our staff meeting today, we made a list of all of the crises that have happened since even 2005. Yeah. And you have religious decline, you have moral decline, you even have this suspicion of what even is real anymore, the redefinition of marriage, and you have all of these things that are happening. And so what I think we, kind of need to do in terms of looking at our all of the crises that have happened, our perspective could have gotten jostled. And so that's what I really like, is that when you look at all of the elements that have happened in our culture, and in some sense the church being in our culture, and in some sense being tossed to and fro, our glasses could have in some people's cases, you've lost your glasses.
Yeah.
And they have fallen off your face. And you need to ask the Lord to, hey, where are my glasses? Because here's the thing, if you can't see without your glasses, you need some help picking them up, right?
Yeah.
And so you might need to ask the Lord, hey, can you remind me where I lost my glasses? And maybe for some, maybe they kind of jostled out of place where you do need to kind of recorrect them. But I mean, I believe wholeheartedly, that's why I'm trying to stress this point, that for many Christians, and I'm talking about those in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, that over the last 20 years, we've gotten kind of rocked. And so we just need to make sure that we're seeing the way, because this is why, I love it. We regard no one from a worldly point of view. We don't look at anybody the way the world looks. We look at the world the way Jesus looks at the world. That's the reason why Ed was stressing what you put on social media. Because a lot of Christians want to attack people that they don't agree with. Well, Jesus ain't doing that. I promise you, he ain't doing that. And so those are things that we just got to make sure that we're seeing the world and everything in the world the way Jesus was seeing. So let's just say, okay, let's look at the moral decline. Let's look at the religious decline. How does Jesus view religious decline? How does he view moral decline? Does he get angry and vindictive and I want to show you? No. One, he's going to lament. He's going to pray, and then he's going to find out how can I engage, right? Now, some people would say, well, didn't he get really mad at the money changers? Okay, well, yeah, let's think about that. They prevented people by upcharging the sacrifice, because that's what they were doing. That's what by upcharging, by having it's kind of like when we go to an Orlando Magic game, and you're like, oh my gosh, $12 for a Sprite? What in the world? They're upcharging. So could you imagine that if I needed a Sprite to in some sense take into the Lord to kind of pour a drink offering out to him, instead of charging what it cost for the Sprite, they're charging 12 times what it costs. Okay, so that's what the temple people were doing, is that it only costs this amount, but they're upcharging so that they can make a profit on the fact that these people needed the sacrifice in order to connect with God, right? So that's why Jesus got really mad at the money changer. So when Jesus looks at a culture that doesn't know him, that's far from him, that are sinners, that are waddling in addiction to their sin, he's not going all Rambo on them. So you shouldn't either. So that's kind of where, that's why we regard no one from a worldly point of view, though we once regarded Christ in this way. So because we were lost and we heard about Christ, we started, we kind of were immediately drawn to this worldly view of Jesus. But what happened, we do so no longer. Why? Because therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. So at some point, Jesus changed you. Jesus, he did that. You didn't do that because, again, and Ed stressed this, is that we can't save ourselves. And I've said it many a times, is that you didn't choose Jesus. Jesus chose you. Yeah. And so when that happened and Jesus chose you and he awakened you to the fact that he's Savior and Lord, and you repented of your sin and you proclaimed him as that's where that transformation occurred. And part of that transformation, and again, I say part of that transformation, is how we see, how we regard people. So I really, really love that point about, the jostling of what's happened over, time. And just making sure that we readjust our glasses where we can actually see clearly through them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And something that he talked about towards the end of the message, but I think that connects to this idea is him cautioning us of consuming these worldview-shaping realities. And he really said, be careful what you put in. It comes out your mouth in the end. So I think that connects to this first point of as we are discerning who we want to be, how we want to follow Jesus, I think all of us can really be challenged with what are we consuming?
Yeah.
What are we looking at? What are we reading? What news are we taking in? What news are we not taking in? What social media are we taking in? What social media are we not taking in?
Yeah.
What books are we reading? What scripture are we reading? All of that, because it will then come out, right? It shapes us. It shapes our heart. It shapes our worldview. And I don't think we always, on a day-to-day basis, consider the reality of that, but that builds up.
Well, yeah, if you're, think about it, like, he talked about talk news, he talked about cable news, and that many people are discipled by both. And for years, I used to watch cable news. I actually don't watch anymore. I do have some apps and some news sources where I at least try to keep up to date on things. But it did occur to me, years ago, that if I'm still, if I'm watching the same guy every day, day in, day out, who's railing against this side, it is going to shape my mind. And it just might be helpful, though. And I've had some, friends and family members that, have said that they, that they watch, other kind of cable news outlets just to see what the other side is actually saying.
Yeah.
Because, again, whenever you're trying to point, kind of at least frame your point of view, you somehow and in ways you distort the other person's point of view so that you can be seen as more right or better. And so I do think that even to your point, that we've just got to be cautious and discerning that we're not being fed by something that is displeasing to the Lord. And again, it's okay. I'm not saying don't watch these things, but just make sure that they're not shaping you in the way that you would see somebody else in a way that Jesus wouldn't see that person.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's so easy for us to not recognize in the moment how things are shaping us.
Yeah.
But as we've all experienced it, as you take a step back from whatever you're consuming 6 months, a year later, you can really say, oh yeah, this was really conforming me, and this was really shaping me. So we have the opportunity at the beginning of this year to consider that and to determine what are we going to let shape us in this coming year. Is it going to be the Word of God, or is it going to be something else? Because something will change us, something will shape us.
Yeah, something's always shaping you.
Always.
Like that's the thing, something's always shaping you. It's just what's shaping you.
That's awesome. So the next point was under this headline of the Sent on a Mission of Reconciliation. And he had this quote. He talked about the Great Commission Highway. He really challenged us, and he said, don't let your life be a cul-de-sac on God's Great Commission Highway. And this idea of the gospel has continued and continued and continued because somebody told somebody and somebody told somebody. So as believers, we can point to somebody that told us, right? He even talked about Billy Graham. He points back to a certain gentleman that told him. So I think that's a tremendous visual for us to recognize that we shouldn't just take for granted this message that we've received, certainly at the beginning of our year. How do we, start putting in steps today so that we ensure that even this year, not even just our life, but even just this year doesn't end in a cul-de-sac, that the message doesn't just stop with us or go 2 houses down and end. So what are your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, it's a great word picture, because we can envision a highway, and then we know what a cul-de-sac is.
Yeah.
That you go in and it doesn't go anywhere. It goes in, and but the good news is it goes in. That means it can at least come back out. So but the thing that I would actually say, when you look at most Christians, you look at most churches, they are living in the cul-de-sac. And what is fascinating, years ago I read, oh gosh, I can't remember the book, Sidewalks of the Kingdom, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
I think it's called Sidewalks of the Kingdom. But it was actually almost like a theology of urban engagement, though. But in this book, he talks about how there was a progression, though, from the cities to suburbia to get away from all of the people. And that when you look at this in some sense, this migration from the cities to the suburbs, I mean, where do cul-de-sacs happen?
The suburbs.
They happen in the suburbs. They don't happen in the city. I mean, because if you look at the way cities are laid out, they are laid out in a grid, not in some sense like when I say a cul-de-sac circle where, like a subdivision, you have one way in, which a subdivision is a cul-de-sac. It's just a larger cul-de-sac. Okay, so a neighborhood is connected by streets. And so there's no cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that is in these urban centers. Now, I know what some of you, brainiac, I can find one. I'm just telling you how it's usually laid out in a grid. Subdivisions, you go in, you come out the same way. It's not a neighborhood. That's why it's called a subdivision. And then those subdivisions, you have smaller cul-de-sacs. Okay, so that's kind of the essence of the suburbs. We want to get away from people, and then you started to have the creation of garages that close. And used to, again, when you look at generations and you look at 50, 60, 70 years ago, houses were built with big front porches because they were mostly in neighborhoods where they set out and and everybody knew their neighbor. But as it evolved into more of the suburbia life, then you had less of the front porches and more of the back porches. And so where everybody, I just want to be by myself. And so, and I think that's what, if Christians aren't careful, and this is backed up, this is backed up by research, is that the longer someone is a Christian, the further removed they are from people who are far from Jesus. And the longer a church is in existence, the further removed from the community they are. So what they have done is that they've moved from more of a neighborhood mentality to more of a suburbia cul-de-sac mentality. And so I think that was a really good, again, word picture to understand, hey, don't become a cul-de-sac on the Great Commission Highway. Yeah. And there are ways to do that, because I think sometimes it might overwhelm people. I don't know how to share the gospel, or I don't even know where, kind of where to start. Well, so a couple things that I would say is that you definitely can start by your living, because Paul even says in his earlier letter to the Corinthians is that, that they are an epistle, like their life is an epistle that God is using to communicate to the world. So that's where I think that if you go back to the Sermon on the Mount, that live such good lives, though they, so that they might see your good works. Peter's going to say that too in his letter. So there is a focus on how we live. Now, it shouldn't stop there, but I do believe it should begin there, because I go back to Acts chapter 1, where it says, "You shall be my witnesses." Well, a witness does testify, but they're able to testify because their life is credible. Yeah. So that's why I don't want to divorce, sharing from showing. I think you need to show so that you build the platform to share. Because if you share without the platform of showing, then to a world that is going to look not in the right way, they're going to say, well, your words and your life, your lips and your life don't match up.
Yeah, the world is already skeptical.
Yeah. So that's where I say you need to start with your life. So you can pray before your meal. You're going to be a person of integrity. You're going to tell the truth. You're going to be kind. You're going to be compassionate. Yeah. You're not going to seek vengeance. There's so many different ways that our life can truly embody the gospel. Start there. And then, as you get opportunities, and Jane the Uber driver was a good, was a good example, because she's just trying to create conversation. And we have one of our elders about to be a governing elder again. Dan Hardaway. He teaches evangelism here. He teaches an evangelism life group, but he's a huge advocate for just carrying on conversations.
Yep.
And that you can just ask, hey, do you have any spiritual desires, or what is your spiritual life or your religious life? Because people are, in our culture context, religion is dying off, but spirituality, I don't want to say dying off. Religious affiliation is declining. I'm not going to say it's dying off, but spirituality is on the rise. Yeah. So you're just asking those questions. Yeah. But then you can even find the ways. I wrote an article years ago called "Using Language as a Missional Liturgy." Just how we respond with our words. So when someone says, "How are you doing?" Like, if they are far from the Lord, maybe you could figure out a way not to be overtly, kind of religious or spiritual, but a way that doesn't answer the way everybody else. Because when somebody says, "How are you?" almost everybody goes, "I'm good," or "I'm fine." Yeah. Fine is usually "I'm fine." Is there something else that you could use intentionally and just start using language as a missional liturgy? Yeah. So those are just some simple ways to make sure that your life stays on the Great Commission highway and you don't become a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. Some people will respond with blessed, just to use a term like that to see if that opens up any sort of conversation. Dan taught me the question, to your point. He said, tell me about your spiritual journey. Yeah. And I have been amazed at how receptive people are of that question. Yeah. Because it's personal, and people love to talk about themselves. They really do. Yeah. And it's kind of a disarming way. But if someone is asking that question and they are really earnest about it, I think you go back to number one, and it can feel boring and kind of a trite answer, but it's really like, go back to the basics of, like, if you do have a desire, right, to be on mission, to share your faith, we can really evaluate not just what we've done in the past, but like, what are we currently doing in terms of our spiritual disciplines? Are we in the Word? Are we praying? Are we praying for others? Pastor Gus says, talk to God about man before you talk to man about God. So if you have a desire to have spiritual conversations with others, if you have anybody on your heart, pray for them. If you don't have anyone on your heart, ask God to put people on your heart. Yeah, I've done it, and it's happened, and it's amazing the spiritual conversations that come out of that. After you spend time praying for the person, and I've been currently praying for some friends, some family members, and it specifically for their salvation. And it is always fascinating to me how spiritual conversations come up in a way that I don't necessarily intend for. Mm-hmm. When, other conversations with other friends, they just don't. Yeah. So I've seen some fruit with that. So I would just encourage you, if you are earnest, don't forsake the foundational principles of be in your Word, pray, encourage, talk with others, other believers, be encouraged. Journaling is one thing that I've never really done. That I would love to do more of. Kaylee has done that a bit with prayer journaling, but just kind of journaling their thoughts. But it's something that really struck me during the pastor search. I think that was one of the commonalities of almost every candidate. All the pastors talked about journaling. Mm-hmm. And it was just a practice that more than anything else, I heard pastor after pastor talk about how beneficial it is for them to get their thoughts down, their prayer thoughts down, their prayer life down, what they're learning in the Word, and it's really, and I know you've talked about that as well. So I would just encourage anybody. I agree that sometimes it can just be this daunting thing, but where there is a desire and there's an earnestness, I know that the Lord will meet you there. Yeah, and He will open up opportunities for you in that.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to this third question on the sermon. It has to do with this idea of representing Jesus in his kingdom, and this idea of us being ambassadors. And what stuck out to me was something that will be pertinent for us this year, but I know it was pertinent for us last year and the year before that. But we should be challenged, and we should be encouraged, and encourage others to represent Jesus and his kingdom regardless of circumstances. And that's regardless of circumstances in our own personal life, but also in the life of our culture and in the life of the church. So what are some thoughts you have about that idea of representing Jesus and his kingdom regardless of what else is happening?
Yeah, the thoughts that, come to my mind is to really drill down on the ambassadorial language.
Okay.
That's a big word.
Yeah, look at that. That's 11 letters or something. I don't know. Gotta count that up.
Because the ambassador lives in a foreign country while belonging to another country. And so therein lies, there's going to be a lot of things that happen in and around where he lives or she lives that they don't agree with, that they're going to be susceptible to in the sense of just living in the close proximity. And so when you take this, from this kingdom level, all right, so you have the kingdom of God that we are part of, that we are citizens of already, but not fully yet. So, if you're watching online, so you got the kingdom of God over here, it's perfect, it's harmonious, everything operates according to its design. And it's coming, but it's not here yet. But there's this extension that we are citizens of this kingdom, but right now we live now in the kingdom and the kingdoms of man. And so in the kingdoms of man, things are fallen, things are broken, things are still sinful. We are still susceptible to all of the brokenness in all of our spheres. But what we are called to do now, and that's one of the things I'm getting excited about with this upcoming message, really about the church, is that ecclesia. It actually was a Greek word that was more of it was more of a kind of a governmental kind of term, where it was an assembly of the called out ones. So they would take, they would take kind of the population, they would find some, kind of leaders, some authorities, they would call them out, and they would form an assembly to work for the common good of the city. Okay. Well, so the ecclesia, so here's the thing, we are the called out ones from the population, from the kingdom, the nation that we were living in. We are the called out ones, so we're separate, but we're actually now, as an assembly, the church, we're an assembly that's part of now this whole other kingdom, now sent back in to work for the common good of the nation in which we were saved from. And so that's so important, because now our authority lies here, and we're to represent that authority here while working on behalf of the nation, the community in which we live, for their good. And so, and again, if you think about, what's their good? Well, their good is to be reconciled. That goes back to the ministry of reconciliation, because they are separated from God. Right. So it would really be good for them, eternally speaking, but not just eternally speaking, just from a human perspective speaking, because when they are reconciled to God, they begin to learn what God, their Creator, has formed them to be and do. So it'd be really good if they were reconciled to God, but it would be really good if you eliminated poverty. It'd be really good if you, eliminated division, racial division, gender inequality, educational inequality. So what is the church doing? Because here in God's kingdom, there is no poor, there is no sick, there is no needy. You can read that of how God foreshadowed that in Israel. and how in the new kingdom, because that's what Jesus foreshadowed too in all of his miracles and what he did. All he's doing is pointing to in God's kingdom, in his full-on out consummated kingdom, there is no lame, there is no disease, there is no poor, there is no needy. And so what he's showing in all of that is what the inbreaking kingdom of God looks like. So in some sense, Jesus, although he is the king of God's kingdom, what he is doing at his first coming is foreshadowing what will one day fully come. And so what Jesus did at his first coming in his ministry, we actually do today. So we got to find ways to represent God's kingdom. And as we do that, it actually would be for the common good of where we live. So,
amen.
So that's what I think about that.
That's awesome.
Number 3, representing Jesus and his kingdom. That's why, like, when I think about even about the ecclesia and this idea of ambassador, but an ambassador, where does he or she stay in? Where do they operate from? An embassy. Okay, so the church is full of ambassadors, and when the church gathers, that is kind of more of an embassy. Okay, and it's in that embassy that we ought to, because again, when you think about an embassy and an ambassador. And I've never been actually in an embassy. I mean, I've seen ambassadors and stuff, but I do know this, is that embassy is land, that is a land, and where that building is, that is seen as the homeland.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like the local police can't just barge into the embassy, because that is their territory that's been carved out and given kind of to them. And so when the church gathers together, we are like this embassy of the kingdom. It's like now this outpost. So you come in here for comfort, for encouragement, to get just one kind of a glimpse of the homeland, but then you're sent back out. As ambassadors. So it's really great. It's a great imagery of the church gathered as an assembly, but also the church scattered as the assembly as well.
Yeah, that's a great imagery of coming in. This idea of sanctuary. It is an outpost, but then there's always this sending back out.
And then to take just even one step further, especially in an election year and how we're trying to figure out this new context in which the church is operating in. But God never called, whether it was in Babylon as exiles or in the New Testament. We don't see Paul saying you are sent out as ambassadors to change the culture, to make the culture the embassy of the kingdom. You don't see that. The church is the embassy of the kingdom, an outpost of the soon coming kingdom. But when we are scattered and sent out, it is for the common good. You're trying to work within the systems of man, because one of these days Jesus will come back a second time, and the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdom of God. So that's coming. But we're not called to do that.
Right.
Jesus is the one. Now, we're called to be witnesses. We're called to be ambassadors, representing, reflecting, but not forcing people to cave in, in some sense, forcing people to convert, forcing people into the conformity around the kingdom. No.
Yeah.
Like that's not what we're called to do.
Yeah, it's the already and the not yet. We get to participate in the transformation, but that full, total transformation, that's not our job. That's Jesus's, and it's not the time. That's for him to do.
Yeah.
So that's great for us to remember. I'd love for us to shift into a couple questions about kind of moving forward. So before we do that, any other final thoughts about the sermon?
Well, the only thing I would tie up there is that his last point was, huge, and it was because of the cross. So I can't. So it's a cross-centered life. That's why we talk about being a Christ-centered. Christ-centered is also, when I say this cross-centric life, because Jesus going to a cross, he died so that we might live. And so the reason why we should, look for a new perspective, Jesus' perspective, or a reason why we should want to live on mission and not in this comfortable cul-de-sac. The reason why we should want to represent Jesus and his kingdom is because of the cross, what he did for us on the cross. That is the motivating factor. We are motivated not by the cross as just an emblem in isolation. We are motivated by what Jesus did and accomplished on the cross. And so that is the ultimate motivation, which is why, going back to a phrase that he said that, you don't need to turn over a new lease on life or a new leaf. New lease on life or I guess some people turn up a new leaf.
Turn over a new leaf.
You need a new life. And the only way you get that new life is by accepting what Jesus did for you on the cross through his death and then his resurrection. Because the resurrection was so important, because if he did not if he was not raised from the dead, then it would have discounted everything he had said he did on the cross. Yep. So the resurrection validates what he did through the crucifixion. So that's why we say death and resurrection. Yep. So, but because of the cross, we do all those things. So just wanted to stress that.
Amen. Yeah, that's helpful to keep that in mind. That is the reason we are doing all of those things above. So as we look forward to this weekend, I have two questions. One, I want to kind of look back over the last couple weeks of what you've been doing, and then we'll look forward to this new sermon series that you said something to the effect of buckle up. So
buckle up, yeah. So a couple things. I've been finalizing my ministry action plan, and so for those of you who are watching online, this is a printout of my ministry action plan. So it's double-sided and many pages, and so
in color.
You might in color. Well, I guess I could have picked black and white, but it was in color. And you might say, well, what's in your ministry action plan? Well, a couple of things. One, personal goals, professional goals that I have as kind of the pastor. And then we go into our church overall goals, what we would like to see just from an attendance standpoint, a budget standpoint, baptism. That's a huge one. How many people do we want to see that we're asking the Lord for us to be able to reach and engage where they come to faith in Christ? And then even some mission goals. We want to see a certain amount of micro churches started this year. So I put those down, and then what I do is I take the four things, and this is what our series is about, of connect, cultivate, care, and commission. So I take the four things that believers do, and this is based upon the New Testament. Yeah. These are four things that believers do that engage in God's mission. So we connect with God and others. We cultivate disciples and leaders. We care for people and resources, and we are commissioned to neighbors and nations. So I take those four C's, and I start looking at the breakdown of our divisions. And then I give them, and then I'm asking the Lord, what's one thing that I think we can do in this division that I think will move the needle for an overall goal? And I'll put that down, and I'll give that to the executive director or the senior staff that's over that division. And so that's what this ministry action plan is. So it's my nuclear football. I carry it everywhere I go, and every single week when I have staff meetings, I look at it, and this is how we're gauging what we're doing in 2024. So I've done that. A couple other things that I was
going to say. So as an example, one of the goals that you have for commission for this year has to do around Serve Day. So you laid out for us, let's have the largest Serve Day that we've had in the last 5 years. Yeah. So that number is 235.
Okay. I was thinking it was bigger. Okay. So
the 260 was the number of sign-ups for one of them, but show-ups was 235. So our number is 236.
When's the next Serve Day?
March 9th.
March 9th. Okay. So, all right. So here's what we got to do right now. By the end of this week.
Okay.
All right. We got to go ahead and create a sign-up sheet.
Yeah.
Because the people who are listening right now, I need you to go sign up.
Okay.
So, because I think we got about, I know several hundred every single week that listens immediately.
We do, yeah. So we'll have 12 to 15 different projects.
Yep.
So we'll start having those projects.
So the biggest, I think, listen, I believe we can do it. I believe we can get over 230. I can get over 230.
I believe so.
So it's coming. So that's
just an example of how laying out a goal like that will kind of galvanize the focus.
Yeah.
To make sure that, what you see is important, what we see is important. We are aligned and we are moving all in the same directions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I was doing. And then really two other things that I was doing is one, thinking more about the life cycle of a sermon or a life cycle of a sermon series.
Okay.
And so I had kind of jotted down that, and the reason why I thought about this, and I've been thinking about this for years, which is one of the reasons why we started Extra Takes, is, I spent so much time developing a message, and then especially, most of my messages are contained within a series. So you put a lot of effort, cumulatively speaking, into a sermon series. And most of the time, people forget what you preach. I even forget what I preach, right? So when you spend that much investment, you want to see a little bit more of a return. Okay, so that's where I started thinking about this life cycle of a sermon or a sermon series. And so you preach it, and in some sense, after you preach it, it goes on to an on-demand, site on our website, right?
Yeah.
This, stays in YouTube, stays in Facebook. But so you preach it, and it kind of remains on demand.
Yeah.
If you want to go back and listen to it. But then the second is the podcast. So that's where Extra Takes came. We talk about the sermon more in detail, like, because we, even for Ed preaching, we can talk a little bit more about the kingdom, because I can promise you, like, so for instance, we got an email over Christmas, and it was from somebody. I don't know if they come on the weekend, but we know that their teenager is connected.
Okay.
But they were worried that we were moving away from what they believe.
Okay.
And when they started to articulate why they felt that way, they said, well, we're not Seventh-day Adventists. That they weren't Seventh-day Adventists, but we kept on using the word Advent. Well,
okay.
It was Christmas.
Sure.
So Advent simply means coming. And so we celebrate Advent, the first coming of Jesus. And so after it was explained to her, she was, But what it just showed is that you take something like a simple word like Advent, and people just immediately think that, I'm not that. Why? Hang on. Let's make sure that we're understanding each other right. And so that's why one of the things I love about Extra Takes is that we can take a concept like an ambassador, and we can really, really expound on that, because you don't have all of the time in the world to expound on that, like reconciliation. Didn't really have a lot of time to expound on that. So you are divided, you are separated. And so just think about whenever you have a rift with maybe your spouse or a friend, or maybe even a family member, there's this rift, there's this separation. But if you're going to bring each other back, if there's going to be this reconciliation, this coming back together in right standing with one another, something has to happen. And almost 100% of the time, there has to be some kind of movement towards like a confession, a repentance, and a forgiveness. Well, in this case, we don't have to forgive God. God is perfect. God is holy. We're the ones that need to be forgiven, but we're also the ones that need to ask for forgiveness, because we're the ones that messed up. We're the ones that rebelled against Him. But Ed couldn't go into all of that.
Right.
And so that's one of the things I love about, our podcast. So you preach it, you podcast it. One of the things I'm going to start doing more this year is I'm going to start pinning it, which means I'm going to convert it into an article, so it can live via an article. So obviously I won't be able to, because most of my sermons are anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 words. So I'm not going to write a 3,000-4,000 word article.
Sure.
But trying to take that and condense it into a kind of a one thought type thing. So we're going to pin it. Then we're going to post it on social media. And so that could be the main point. That could be a clip. We're going to really try to post it And then we already do this, but again, I put it within the life cycle of a sermon, but we have ponder points. And so that's through our digging deeper. And so if you want to be on our digging deeper email, so Barbara Olson, she creates these ponder points where it's basically a detailed outline of the message with several questions and a reading plan for that week to coincide with what was just preached on. So if you would like that digging deeper, or these ponder points as I would call them, you can email Barb Olson. So it's Barb, B-A-R-B .Olson, O-L-S-E-N, at northlandchurch.net. And so she'd love to, get you in on that email. And then the last two would be publish and then produce. And so publish, like some series, some series would not warrant a book, but like I did a giving series or the Ruth series. It was a 4-week series. It could be converted into an ebook. So something like 40, 50, 60 pages, and it could be an ebook where you get it. So and then the public is Jim Hogue, who runs Z88.3. He's a longtime Northlander. And so we've been talking about creating a feature, Z88, with me. And so it will be the main point with Pastor Josh. And so what I would want to do is take a sermon that I've done, and I always have a main point.
Yeah.
And so we take that main point, and I do basically a message in a minute, with that main point. And so that becomes the life cycle of a sermon series. So that's one of the things that I worked on.
That's awesome.
And then the last thing that I worked on, because at the end of the day, like God has called me to pastor. And so the question that I wrote was, how do I pastor well? Like, how do I shepherd? How do I engage people? How do I do that well? I mean, again, with so many people. But even, and this is one of the things that, I think sometimes people, because I've been in both small, mid-size, large-size, churches, and it's always hard to engage everyone, even if it's a church running 150, 200. It's hard for one person to do that. But I still, nevertheless, I want to pastor well. So a couple things that I wrote down that I do or that I can do more of is the weekend gathering. So how do I pastor well in the weekend gathering? Well, that's where I need to prepare well in preaching, but that's why I'm always present and accessible before the gathering and after the gathering. So if you need to talk to me, if you want to talk to me, if you want to come by and say hi, if you have something that you want me to pray for, that's why I do those. So this weekend gathering, extra takes is another way that I really try to pastor well, because this is another way of getting what's in my head out to people, because God, it's part of, what he's called in terms of shepherding and pastoring is that what he's done in me, I want to share with others. So all of the things that he has given me from a biblical understanding, I want to share. And you can't say everything on the weekend. So that's extra takes. Social media. This is one where I've always struggled with my understanding of social media, because I don't want to promote myself. Like, that is not what I want to do. And I see so many people basically promoting, at least from how smart they are, how, what they get to do. And so, but I do think that social media can be a way that I leverage pastoring. And so, here's what I would love to hear back from you all. So the community, my Northland family and friends. So whether you are listening via podcast or through the video, like if you could email me at pastorjosh@northlandchurch.net and just share what you would like to see me post about. So again, because I don't want social media to be about me, but I do feel like I can leverage it to pastor well. So if you want to tell me what you would love to see me post about on social media, that could be Facebook, Instagram. I am going to start TikTok, because that's actually where the younger generation is. So I love to leverage that. So that's one way. And then writing. I've always loved writing. I knew that coming here, because can you believe in March I'll celebrate 2 years?
No, I can't believe it.
2 years.
Wow.
I mean, like 2 years here. I mean, that would, then you fast forward and it would have been like, 2 years, 4 months or something. So we started engaging. But I knew that moving here, coming here, and all of the work that needed to be done, I wouldn't have the time to write as I needed. And that, again, I love writing. So I think in this year, 2024, I'm able to carve out just a little bit more time to write more, which is part of the, again, the life cycle of a sermon series, that I can actually write a little bit more. But I also want to go above and beyond the writing for just the sermon. Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of things that I can write on that will help educate our church as to why we do what we do, what are the challenges that the church is facing, not just Northland, but the church in general. So I want to write more. And then, people know this, but Joni and I, we've tried to be accessible, and that's the double-edged sword. So we have a long list of people that want to do dinner with us. But we still want to do that. That's the way that we want to pastor well. And then the last last thing that I put is that I want to be present at more Northland ministries, not to do anything, but just to be a cheerleader. So I want to make sure that I'm showing up. Now, again, I don't have unlimited time. Yeah. But I do throughout the year. I can show up to a student event. I can show up in the children's area. I can show up at a life group. I can show so I want to make sure that I do that. So those are things that, and they're not necessarily part of my map. These are things that for me, I had the time, so I'm grateful for the time that I had over the kind of the Christmas break. And so these are some things that the Lord, I feel like kind of gave to me to kind of write and keep in mind as we progress in 2024.
Wonderful. That's a great list. So to wrap it up, let's look forward to the next 5 weeks. We've got this weekend on church membership, and then we're going to dig into this Engage series.
Well, yeah. So this week, and that's where this is kind of almost like a prelude. Yeah. To so it could have been part of the sermon series, but I'm just setting it up. Yeah. I'm just setting it up because and I actually think it's probably going to be one of the at least top 3 messages that I've ever given since I've been here at Northland.
Most important, really.
I do believe, because I'm setting up the understanding of why church. Because. And I think the main point is I'll go ahead and give you the main point, or something to the effect, is that the church was not a religious invention. It was created by divine intention. And so that's what I want to flesh out, because I think in our cultural context, I do think that we have forgotten what who the church is. Why did the church even come about? And then this whole idea, how does the church relate to God's mission? I won't be able to know. Is that the church did not create God's mission. God's mission gave birth to the church. Yeah. And so that's actually extremely important to understand as we move into the Engage series of what we do as God's people, as God's church, to engage in His mission. Yeah, yeah. Because those 4 C's are what we do as believers who are part of a church to engage, to participate in, to be active in God's mission. But unless you understand who the church is and why it is so important, you'll never engage in these 4 disciplines as God's people to participate in His mission. So that's why it is so important that we understand, because I do believe that our culture by and large, and I'm talking about the subculture of Christianity inside American culture, we have lost sight of the importance of church. And again, I'm going to have a little fun. This is why I'm going to come out swinging. When I said I was going to come out swinging, this is what
I got nervous.
I'm about to tell you why.
Okay.
Okay. So I've created at least 7 myths of church, of what we say, in some sense of what I've heard Christians say, what I've heard, the American culture say about church, that is a myth. It's not true. And so I want to have fun with that, but you remember what one of the things that I did in the Christmas Eve, message where I talked about why you might have de-wonderized Christmas, and some of them were a little punchy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, these are gonna be a little punchy. That's why I'm saying. Well, I'm coming out swinging, but it's so I'm telling you, I'm getting animated. And you can see me. It's so good. I'm telling you, it is so good because I want to debunk these myths and set it up to actually giving a biblical overview of how the church even came to be and what the New Testament teaches us about church.
So when we think about the life cycle of a sermon, it sounds like there's some good opportunity to write an article after this.
Oh yeah. There'd be a really good article about, and actually you could actually convert it into multiple articles, because one of the things I'm not going to expound on it here, but I'm actually going to go over all of the words that are used in the New Testament to explain or to give an image of who the church is. So, for instance, the church is the bride. The church is the, so I'm going to go over all of those imageries, because I think that's so important because, it's just so important. I don't want to give
don't
too much.
Spoil it.
Yeah, but it's and I do believe, because we're living in a time where we are losing our biblical literacy, meaning understanding the Bible. So we're living more and more into a time of biblical illiteracy where, I don't take these for granted anymore. I've known them for decades. But in some sense, when they become so familiar, to you, they can almost lose their wonder.
Of course.
And their meaning. And so, but when you look at how the New Testament authors depict the church, it's fascinating. And then when you understand the church in the context of history, of God's redemptive history, you're like, well, that's a no-brainer of why the church is that important and what the church, and what the church is supposed to do. So, Awesome. So don't if you need to be here. You need to be here in person, and if you can, you're traveling or whatever you may do. Please at least either engage in or listen to it, because it's that important. It really is. It's that important.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. So I think we'll end there for today.
Awesome. Well, Northland family and friends, thank you for listening to the second episode of 2024. We are super, super grateful that you took the time to tune in. We love you. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.